welcome to day 18 of Junk Journal July embellishments. So I am going to be needing some strips of paper. So I've got two pouches here, one with really long strips in and one with shorter strips in. Now for this particular project you can use a heavy paper, or you can use your thicker scrapbooking paper scraps, but I wouldn't suggest using paper scraps because it's going to be too thin, because we're going to be stitching on it. If that's all that you have, I would actually stick two pieces back to back to make it thicker and make it more durable. So I'm going to go off and go and choose some scraps, and then I'll be back to show you what we're making. So these are the paper scraps that I've decided to use. I've gone for fairly neutral because I think it'll be easier with the buttons that I'm going to be using. Plus the fact then it means that it can go into any journal if it's a neutral thing. Plus I want to do some stamping on here, and if I choose something that's really highly decorated, then the stamping's not going to show up. As you can see, I've got two piles. These are the thinner papers that I want to use. But they need backing, so I'm going to leave those for the time being, because I actually want to make a few of these ready to go so that I can stitch buttons on them later. So we're basically making some button tags. So what I actually want to create is a 1 inch wide strip by 3 3/4 inches long. Now not every scrappy piece of paper that I've got is going to meet that criteria. I'm not going to hold it against it. So if I have a look here, this is, that's actually round about 3 3/4, probably just a bit over. I'm not going to trim that tiny little bit off because it's just not worth it. And the actual width of this is 2.5 inches wide. Well, I'm not going to keep a 1/2 inch wide strip because I'm trying to get rid of these scraps. So if I do this to 1.5 inches, hang on, I forgot what I said now, 2.5 inches, that's 1 1/4 inches wide. So it's a little bit wider. But so what, I can just put some bigger buttons on there. I've just turned these over because you can't really see that very well on there. But I've cut myself a template, and this piece is narrower than 1 inch. Again, I'm not going to hold it against it. So as you can see, this is a lot thinner, but that's fine. I could put smaller buttons on there. So if I turn this over and use my template, I'm just going to centralise that. Very ish, and then taper off those corners to make my tag shape. Okay, and I'll do that with all of them. And then what I did was I went round and put my scissors down. I went round and I inked up all the edges of all the ones that I've cut out, and I punched a hole in the top using my this little hole punch. And as you can see, look, that one's shorter. Again, I'm not going to hold it against it because I can put some smaller buttons on there. And the majority of these are going to be covered in buttons, but I want to leave a little space here on the bottom, especially for those that are slightly plainer. Not so much on these, but I want to put a little stamp at the bottom just to make them a little bit pretty. And the other thing that I want to do is I've got one of my Tim Holtz, I'll bring it up close if you to see, I've got one of my Tim Holtz stamps, and I'm going to stamp that on the back where I can, maybe even on the front. So I'm just going to stamp. I've got a little butterfly. So just put a little butterfly on two. And I've also got a Lavinia dandelion stamp. Now I don't want the whole of the stalk on there because it's going to take up too much room. and I've got a piece of scrap paper underneath because I've already started ruining my stamping mat. We'll have you at a slight angle, bit of a saucy angle. Okay, maybe a little bit too low there, Carol. Do you a little bit higher. Yeah, that's just enough declaration on there for me, for them. And I'm just going to stamp it on the edge where I don't want it. We'll go for middle. And in fact, we'll do this one skew-if. Bit skew-ify. And these two, I'm going to put it on the back. Next step then is to choose some buttons. So with this one being purpley background, of course, got to choose some purple buttons. And because these are small, I can fit 4 on there. And some of them are 4 holes and some of them are 2 holes. So that would probably be my placement. Now, to stitch these in place and to hold the buttons in place, especially with them being tiny, is going to prove a little bit on the difficult side. So what I did was I just took each of the buttons, and a pair of tweezers might come in handy right now, but mine are all upstairs, is not in the centre of the button, but at the top of the button. I just put a tiny dot of my Glossy Accents glue on there, and then dropped it in place. And then whilst this glue was offsetting, so that, you know, the button was going to adhere to the card, I'd then go on to the next card. Let's do you that way. We'll do the 4 holes on the diamond, so that looks quite pretty. And as I say, it's only a real tiny little dot of glue, just to hold it in place. Don't use, like, you know, double-sided tape or anything like that to hold it, because we've got to sew these in place, and we don't want our needle going through all that sticky. The next thing to do is then poke some holes in. Now, my pokey tool's upstairs, so I'm just using my needle, and I've turned my stamping mat over. Shh, don't tell no one, because it's a nice thick foam pad. And but you want something underneath to be able to just poke through the holes of the buttons. Now, when it comes to a 4-hole button, I'm just going to do 2 of them, because it's just purely for decorative purposes that I'm doing the stitching. And the reason why I'm doing that, and if I can do this carefully because my glue hasn't gone off, but it gives me the holes on the back, so that when it comes to stitching, I can see where I need to go, rather than me keep stabbing trying to find the hole of the button. So I'm just going to let that glue set off, and then I'll come back and show you how to stitch them on. So I've got some thread. Ordinary sewing thread isn't just quite strong enough unless you're using double the amount to stitch with. And I'm starting off with a knot, a substantial knot on the end, don't know if you can see that, and a tiny tail. And I'm starting at the bottom and working my way up to the top. So because I've poked those holes on the back, it means that I should be able to just go through that hole and come through the hole of the button. And I'm going to stitch over that twice. So that would be once. I could leave it at once, but I like to make sure that it's secure so it's not going to fall off. And then go through it a second time. and then I'm going to take the thread straight the way across to the next button. So I'm not cutting it off, I'm just going straight across to the next button. And again, if you have a look at old button cards, if you have a look at the back, that's exactly what they did. So this one's going vertical because I put these buttons on the diagonal, so I don't want to be stitching all 4 holes. Okay, I'm taking it straight the way across the back to the next one. Right, so that's them now stitched in place. If I try and show you up close, to finish off the thread, I've got this straight stitch on the back here, which is where I stitched the button twice. So I'm going to slip the needle underneath that last stitch, and I'm going to thread the needle underneath this really long stitch as well. But I'm not going to pull it all the way through, and I'm left with this loop, and I'm going to put my needle through that loop twice and pull it in. And that has now secured all those buttons in place, and I've ended up with this cute little button tag. I'm actually going to leave all of mine until I come to put them in my journal, because then it will determine what sort of colours and that I use. But that is basically it. Rather than keeping you waiting, I'm just waiting for the glue to go off on those before I can stitch them in place. But I have those 3 ready. I have all these strips ready so that I can make some more. And then these are some that I did earlier, so that I could show you some different examples of all these different little button tags that I'd made. But they're going to come in really nicely with my autumn journals as well. So I hope you're inspired to go off and have a look at your buttons, have a look at your scrap papers, and see what you can come up with for yourself. Okay, thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Bye for now.